Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked his gear one more time. The morning sun shone down on the training grounds of the Galactic Defense Academy. Around him, dozens of alien cadets from different planets prepared for their final test. This test would decide who became officers in the Galactic Defense Force and who went home. Jake looked around at his fellow cadets. There were bug-like Veltar with their many eyes, tall reptilian Krathen with scales that looked like armor, graceful Orions with their tentacle arms, and small but quick Nexan warriors. Among all these aliens, Jake was one of only 3 humans, in a class of 47 cadets. His roommate Zix walked over on his 6 clicking legs. The Veltar's compound eyes showed worry as he spoke through his translation device. Jake Morrison, your body shows high stress levels. Maybe you should try meditation before the test starts. Thanks, Zix, but I'm fine, Jake said, checking his training rifle's power level. Just ready to get this done. Jake thought about his family back on Earth. His sister Lisa had sent him a good luck message that morning. His parents had worked hard and saved money to help him reach this point. 3 years of training, countless hours of study, and his family's hopes all came down to the next few hours. Commander Valhes called for attention. The massive Krathen officer's scales gleamed like black metal in the sunlight. His voice carried the authority of someone who had fought in wars across many star systems. All the different species fell silent when he spoke. Today is your final test, Commander Valhes announced. You will face challenges designed to test not just your fighting skills but your ability to keep going when defeat seems certain. Many of you will find your limits today. Some will discover they can push beyond those limits. The commander's reptilian eyes looked at each cadet, staying a moment longer on each human. The test has 3 parts. First, individual combat. Second, survival in hostile environments. Third, leading a team under pressure. Fail any part and you are dismissed from the academy immediately. Jake felt his heart beat faster. Everything he had worked for came down to this day. Cadet Morrison, Commander, Valhes called out. You will go first for combat testing. Jake stepped onto the training platform. The arena materialized around him as holographic walls rose from the floor. The simulation created a complex city environment with broken buildings, multiple levels, and places to hide. The smell of electricity filled his nose as the training program started. Your opponent will be chosen randomly from the combat database, the computer voice said. Scenario, urban warfare. Mission, stop the hostile target while protecting civilians. Begin. The figure that appeared across the arena made Jake's blood run cold. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, the holographic Krathen warrior wore red armor of the elite shock troops. These were the soldiers who had held the line against the Void Swarm for 3 straight years. They were known as some of the toughest fighters in the galaxy. Jake raised his training rifle. He knew it would only stun, not kill, but the holographic enemy would react as if the threat was real. The Krathen warrior moved fast for something so big, using cover well as it advanced through the fake city. The first fight lasted less than 10 seconds. Jake managed to hit the warrior twice in the center of its chest, but the armor absorbed the shots. In return, an energy blast burned the concrete where Jake had been standing just moments before. Jake rolled behind a fallen pillar, his mind racing through his options. 3 more quick battles followed, each bringing the Krathen closer. Jake's training kicked in. Move, find cover, breathe steady, aim carefully. But it wasn't enough. The warrior was too experienced, too well protected, and too determined. When the final moment came, Jake found himself trapped in what used to be a store. The Krathen warrior stood in the doorway with its energy weapon pointed at his chest. In real combat, Jake would have been dead 3 times over. Give up, the warrior demanded. Jake looked at the weapon pointed at him, then at the alien warrior, holding it. Every training manual said to surrender when the situation was hopeless. Every survival course taught knowing when to quit. But something deeper than training stirred in Jake's chest. It was the same thing that had driven humans to cross oceans in wooden ships and explore space when other species were happy, staying on their home worlds. No, Jake said simply. What happened next would be talked about in academy halls for years. Jake dove forward, not away from the weapon, but toward it. He accepted the stunning blast full in the chest as he closed the distance. The impact should have left him unconscious on the floor. Instead, he grabbed the holographic warrior, using momentum and desperation to fight against the massive strength advantage. The simulation ended with both fighters on the ground. Jake's training weapon was pressed against the warrior's neck. Technically, it was a tie. Both had landed killing shots. But Jake had done something the programmers hadn't expected. He had kept fighting after taking what should have been a knockout blow. As the fake arena faded away, Jake found himself on his knees in the center of the platform. His chest heaved and every nerve felt like it was on fire from the stunning charge. Around the observation deck, alien cadets stood in shocked silence. Even Commander Val Hess seemed lost for words. "Acceptable performance," the commander finally said, though his tone suggested more than just acceptance. "Report to medical for evaluation, then go to Phase 2. As Jake struggled to his feet, he caught sight of his reflection in the polished surface of the arena's control panel. His face was pale, sweat covered his forehead, and his hand shook slightly from the after effects of the stunning blast. But his eyes held a fire that hadn't been there that morning. Dr. Quiche, an Orion healer, examined Jake in the medical bay. Her tentacle arms moved precisely over various scanning devices as she studied the readings from his test with growing concern. "The neural disruption from the stunning blast should have made you unconscious for at least 6 minutes," Dr. Quiche said in the musical voice typical of her species. "Yet you kept moving and thinking clearly throughout the fight. Most curious." Jake sat on the examination table, still feeling occasional tremors in his hands. "Just stubborn, I guess." "Stubbornness does not override brain responses, Cadet Morrison. Your species continues to show interesting differences from our models." Dr. Quiche made notes on her medical tablet. "You are cleared for Phase 2, though. I recommend watching for delayed shock responses." Jake nodded and headed for the door. Phase 2 would test his survival skills in hostile environments. But as he walked through the corridors of the academy, he noticed something different in how the alien cadets looked at him. There was a new respect in their eyes, mixed with something that might have been awe. Word was already spreading through the academy about the human who had kept fighting after taking a blow that should have ended the match. Jake Morrison had passed the first phase of his final test, but more importantly, he had shown his alien classmates something about the human spirit that textbooks couldn't teach. The first phase was complete, but Jake had the feeling that the real test was just beginning. Phase 2 would push him to his physical limits. Phase 3 would test his leadership under impossible conditions. But right now, all that mattered was that he was still moving forward. Jake thought about his sister's message that morning, wishing him luck. He thought about his parents, who had sacrificed so much to get him this far. Most of all, he thought about the fire that burned in every human heart. The fire that said no matter how hard you get hit, you keep moving forward. The academy corridors stretched ahead of him, leading to the next challenge. Jake Morrison squared his shoulders, ignored the lingering pain from the stunning blast, and walked toward whatever came next. He was human, and humans didn't quit. Phase 2 took place in the Academy's environmental simulation chamber. This massive facility could copy conditions from any planet in the known galaxy. When Jake entered, the chamber looked like the toxic swamplands of Vega Prime. Poisonous mist hung in the air. The ground was soft and unstable, and dangerous creatures moved in the shadows. The mission was simple to understand but hard to complete. Navigate 5 kilometers of hostile environment, find 3 hidden supply caches, and reach the pickup point within 2 hours. Jake's gear included basic survival equipment, emergency food, and a distress beacon for true emergencies. What made Phase 2 especially challenging was that cadets didn't do it alone. Jake found himself grouped with 5 other cadets. There was Zix, his Veltar roommate, a Nexan female named Cora, 2 Orions called Vish and Tem, and a massive Krathan warrior named Gex. Each species brought different advantages to the challenge, but also different problems. The Veltar couldn't handle high humidity for long periods. The Orion's sensitive breathing system struggled with the toxic air despite their breathing masks. The Nexan's natural speed was limited by the unstable ground, and the Krathan, while incredibly strong and tough, moved slowly through the thick vegetation. Jake found himself naturally taking charge not because anyone appointed him leader, but because he seemed to be the one thinking ahead. When Visha's breathing mask began failing 20 minutes into the exercise, Jake shared his emergency oxygen supply. When Cora became lost in the thick fog, Jake used his compass and the position of the artificial sun to guide the group back on track. The first supply cache was hidden in what looked like ancient temple ruins, half underwater in dark water and guarded by holographic predators. These creatures moved like a cross between earth crocodiles and something from humanity's worst nightmares. Jake planned the group's approach, using Zix's natural camouflage abilities and Gex's strength to get the cache, while the others watched for danger. Everything went wrong during the approach to the second cache. The cache sat on a rocky cliff that required careful climbing to reach. Jake was leading the climb when a section of artificial rock broke away under Cora's feet. Without thinking, he threw himself sideways to catch her, managing to grab her wrist just as she began to fall toward the sharp rocks below. The move saved Cora's life, but it left Jake hanging by one hand from a dangerous ledge with the full weight of a Nexan pulling on his other arm. His shoulder screamed in pain, and he could feel his grip beginning to slip on the wet rock. "Let go," Cora called up to him. "The fall will not kill me, but you cannot hold us both." Jake looked down at her, then at the rocks below. A fall from this height might not kill a Nexan, but it would certainly cause serious injury. And serious injury meant mission failure for the entire team. "Not happening," Jake said through gritted teeth, struggling to find footing against the cliff face. What happened next would be studied by alien scientists for decades, using strength that shouldn't have been possible given his position. Jake somehow managed to swing Cora close enough to the cliff face for her to find handholds. Then he pulled himself back up to the ledge through pure determination and what his teammates would later describe as impossible stubbornness. The second cache was secured without more problems, but Jake's shoulder had been damaged in the rescue. Medical scanners would have shown torn muscles and severe strain. These were injuries that should have ended his participation in the trial, but Jake wrapped the shoulder tightly and kept moving forward. The third cache presented the greatest challenge yet. It was located in the center of what the simulation called a kinetic field. This was an area where gravity worked strangely, creating zones where things might weigh 3 times normal or might float helplessly in the air. Jake's injured shoulder made the constantly changing gravity even harder to handle. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain through his upper body, and his right arm was getting weaker. But he continued to guide the team's movements, calling out warnings about gravity changes and finding the safest path through the dangerous zone. It was Giex, who noticed something the others had missed. "Human Jake," the Krathan said in his deep voice. "Your injury is worse than you have said." "I'm fine," Jake replied automatically, then caught himself as a gravity shift nearly sent him falling into a pit of poisonous water. "I mean, I can finish the mission." Gex studied him with the calculating look of a species that had survived countless wars. "Your species does not know when to give up. This is both strength and weakness. Right now, it's just what we need," Jake said, finding the final cache in a relatively stable gravity pocket. "Come on, pickup point is 2 kilometers northeast." The journey to the pickup point pushed every member of the team to their limits. The toxic atmosphere had begun affecting even the protected species. The unstable ground had caused 2 injuries that required teammates to help carry the wounded. The time limit was approaching fast. Jake's shoulder had gone from painful to nearly useless, but he continued to lead from the front, making decisions and adjustments as conditions changed. They reached the pickup point with 7 minutes to spare. As the simulation ended and the swampland faded back into the clean walls of the training chamber, Jake finally let himself acknowledge how badly he was hurt. His right arm hung useless at his side, and waves of sickness swept over him as the adrenaline began to fade. Dr. Quiche was waiting with her medical scanner, her expression mixing professional concern with scientific fascination. "Cadet Morrison, these readings show you should have been unable to function 30 minutes ago. How did you continue with this degree of tissue damage?" Jake looked around at his teammates, all of whom were staring at him with expressions ranging from amazement to something approaching worship. Even Gex, a warrior from a species known for their toughness, seemed impressed. "Had a job to finish," Jake said simply. Commander Val Hess approached the group, his scaled features unreadable. "Phase 3 begins in 1 hour. Medical treatment is available for those who need it." Jake looked at his useless arm, then at the commander. "I'll be ready." "Cadet Morrison," the commander said quietly. "Wisdom sometimes means knowing when to withdraw." Jake met the alien officer's gaze steadily. "With respect, sir, I didn't come this far to quit now." What Jake didn't know was that his words had been heard not just by his immediate group but by every instructor and senior cadet monitoring the exercise. Word was already spreading through the academy about the human who had continued leading his team while carrying injuries that would have stopped most species. Dr. Keish approached with a pain injection. "This will reduce the immediate discomfort but won't repair the damage. You'll be able to function, but the underlying injury remains serious." "How long will it last?" Jake asked as she administered the medication. "About 4 hours for your species, though it will become less effective as physical stress increases." The Orion healer's tentacles moved in agitation. "Cadet Morrison, I must emphasize that continued use of this limb could result in permanent nerve damage." "Understood," Jake replied, though they both knew he had no intention of quitting. As Jake prepared to leave the medical bay, Zix approached him with his characteristic clicking walk. "Jake Morrison, the other cadets are calling what you did the human way. They say humans do not yield when others would find it reasonable to do so." Jake flexed his fingers, relieved to find some feeling returning to his right hand thanks to the pain blocker. "It's not about being unreasonable, Zix. It's about not leaving people behind." "This is what puzzles us," Zix replied. "Your logic appears flawed, yet your results suggest otherwise. How do you reconcile this contradiction?" Jake thought about that as he walked toward the preparation area for Phase 3. How could he explain to an alien species that sometimes the illogical choice was the right choice? That sometimes you had to ignore the smart play and do what felt right in your heart? "Maybe that's what makes us human," he said finally. "We do things that don't make sense on paper but somehow work out anyway." Phase 3 was still ahead, and it would test more than just physical endurance. It would test his ability to lead others when everything seemed hopeless. But Jake had already proven something important to himself and his alien classmates. He had shown that humans possessed something that couldn't be measured by scanners or predicted by computers. They possessed the ability to keep moving forward when every logical reason said to stop. As Jake prepared for the final phase of his trial, he thought about what Commander Val Hess had said about wisdom and withdrawal. Maybe the commander was right. Maybe there were times when the smart thing was to quit. But this wasn't one of those times, not when his teammates were counting on him. Not when his family's hopes rested on his shoulders. Not when he had come so far and had so little left to go. Jake Morrison was human, and humans didn't quit. They kept moving forward no matter what stood in their way. Phase 3 took place in the Academy's Command Simulation Center. This facility could copy the bridge of any known starship or ground command post. When Jake arrived, he found himself assigned to a copy of a Terran Defense Force command bunker. The room had tactical displays, communication equipment, and a small team of holographic soldiers who would follow his orders. The scenario was brutal in its simplicity. Jake had been given command of a mixed unit defending a civilian evacuation site against overwhelming enemy forces. His resources were limited, his backup was delayed, and civilian transports were still loading refugees when the attack began. But Phase 3 had an extra twist that made it especially hard for someone in Jake's condition. The simulation included full environmental effects. Explosive blasts could knock a commander off their feet. Smoke and debris made it hard to see. Equipment failures required physical work to fix. The first wave of attackers struck 15 minutes into the scenario. Jake coordinated his defenses from the command post, directing artillery fire and moving his units to maximize coverage while protecting the evacuation routes. The pain blocker held, but he could feel his shoulder beginning to stiffen as the medication worked to prevent movement that might cause more injury. "Sir," "We've lost contact with Bravo Company," reported Lieutenant Hayes, one of the holographic soldiers. "Last message said they were being overrun." Jake studied the tactical display, noting the gap in their defensive line where Bravo Company had been positioned. The enemy would exploit that weakness within minutes, potentially cutting off the evacuation route entirely. "Move Charlie Company to cover the gap," Jake ordered, "and signal the transports they need to speed up loading." "Charlie Company reports they're already fighting enemy armor," Hayes replied. "They can't move without breaking contact." It was the kind of impossible situation that command officers faced in real combat. Too many threats, too few resources, and civilian lives hanging in the balance. Jake felt sweat on his forehead despite the climate-controlled environment. His shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, a constant reminder of his physical limitations. A massive explosion rocked the command bunker, causing several displays to flicker and filling the air with artificial smoke. Jake struggled to stay on his feet as debris rained down from the fake ceiling. A lesser commander might have taken shelter, waiting for the bombardment to pass before continuing operations. Instead, Jake moved closer to the tactical display, using his good arm to work the controls, while his injured shoulder screamed in protest. If the enemy was close enough to target the command post directly, the situation was even worse than the displays showed. "All units, priority channel," Jake announced over the communication system. "I need a status report on remaining ammunition and casualties. We're going to make our stand here." The responses came back quickly and none of them were good. Delta Company was down to 20% strength. Echo Company had lost half their heavy weapons. The artillery units were running low on ammunition, and the evacuation was only 60% complete. By every reasonable measure, the defense was doomed. Any smart commander would begin planning a fighting withdrawal, sacrificing some civilian lives to save the majority. It was the practical choice, the logical choice, the choice that would save the most lives overall. Jake Morrison was having none of it. "Lieutenant Hayes, signal all transport captains. I want those ships loaded to maximum capacity. Safety margins be damned. We're not leaving anyone behind." "Sir, that exceeds recommended passenger limits by—" "I know what it exceeds," Jake cut him off. "Do it anyway." The second wave hit harder than the first. Jake watched on his displays as enemy forces punched through their defensive line in 3 separate locations. His remaining units fell back in good order, but they were being compressed into an increasingly smaller area around the evacuation site. It was then that the simulation threw its cruelest twist. A direct hit on the command bunker's power systems knocked out the primary displays and damaged the communication array. In order to maintain command and control, someone would need to climb into the maintenance tunnel and manually reconnect the power couplings. This task required both hands and considerable physical ability. Jake looked at the access hatch, then at his injured arm. The pain blocker was losing effectiveness, and his right shoulder felt like it was on fire every time he moved it. But his troops were fighting and dying based on his orders, and civilians were depending on his leadership to get them to safety. Without hesitation, Jake hauled himself into the maintenance tunnel. The space was barely large enough for a human, filled with cables, pipes, and sharp-edged components that seemed designed to cause maximum discomfort. Jake had to use both arms to navigate through the cramped space, each movement sending fresh waves of agony through his damaged shoulder. But he kept moving forward. The power coupling was located 30 feet into the tunnel, in a junction box that required precise manipulation of multiple connections. Jake's right hand shook as he worked, his vision blurring from pain and exhaustion. Twice he had to stop and rest, fighting off waves of nausea that threatened to overwhelm him. "Sir, we need those displays back online." Lieutenant Hayes' voice crackled through the bunker's internal communication system. "The enemy is massing for a final assault." "Working on it," Jake managed, forcing his damaged arm to complete the delicate rewiring process. When the displays finally flickered back to life, Jake emerged from the maintenance tunnel looking like he'd been through a war. His uniform was torn. His face was pale with exhaustion, and his right arm hung at an awkward angle that suggested the pain blocker had finally been overwhelmed. But the tactical situation was displayed clearly once again, and Jake immediately began coordinating the final defense. The enemy's last assault was everything they could bring to bear: armor, infantry, air support, and concentrated artillery fire. Jake's remaining units were outnumbered 4-1, low on ammunition, and fighting from positions that were being systematically destroyed by enemy fire. Any reasonable person would have surrendered. The simulation was designed to be unwinnable. It was a test of how commanders handled inevitable defeat. The expected response was to negotiate the best possible terms for both military personnel and civilians. Jake Morrison had other ideas. All units, all frequencies, he announced over the communication system. Fix bayonets. We're going to buy our people the time they need. What followed was 10 minutes of the most intense simulated combat the Academy's systems had ever processed. Jake coordinated a defense that existed more on determination than tactical reality. He kept his units fighting when logic said they should have broken. He maintained communication when the equipment should have failed. He somehow held a perimeter that should have collapsed under the enemy assault. When the evacuation transports finally lifted off, they carried every single civilian refugee. Not one person had been left behind. Jake's defensive force had been reduced to less than 30% strength. The command bunker was a smoking ruin. He himself was barely conscious from pain and exhaustion, but they had completed their mission. The simulation ended and the command center faded back to its normal appearance. Jake found himself surrounded by silence. Every instructor, every senior cadet, and every AI observer had witnessed something that challenged their understanding of tactical reality. Commander Valhes approached slowly, his expression unreadable. Cadet Morrison, by all tactical assessments, your defense should have failed within the first hour. Jake struggled to focus on the commander's words, his vision still blurry from pain and exhaustion. But it didn't fail, sir. No, the commander agreed quietly. It did not, though I confess I do not understand how. From somewhere in the observation area, Jake heard Zix's clicking voice. It is the human way. They do not yield when others would find it reasonable to do so. Jake wanted to explain that it wasn't just stubbornness or some genetic quirk that kept humans fighting against impossible odds. It was something deeper, a refusal to accept that some problems couldn't be solved, that some challenges couldn't be overcome, that some people couldn't be saved. But the words wouldn't come. The pain blocker had finally worn off completely, and waves of agony were washing over him from his mangled shoulder. The adrenaline that had sustained him through the trial was fading, leaving him shaky and sick. Dr. Quiche appeared at his side with a medical scanner and a concerned expression. Cadet Morrison, you require immediate surgical intervention. The damage to your shoulder is now quite severe. Jake nodded weakly, finally allowing himself to acknowledge what his body had been telling him for hours. But as he was helped toward the medical bay, he caught sight of the tactical display showing his final defense. Every civilian had been evacuated, every single one. That made everything else worthwhile. The other cadets watched in silence as Jake was escorted away. They had witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about limits and logical behavior. The human had faced an impossible situation and somehow found a way to win. Not through superior firepower or brilliant tactics, but through sheer refusal to accept defeat. As Jake disappeared into the medical bay, the alien cadets began to understand why humans had earned such a reputation across the galaxy. The surgery took 4 hours. Dr. Quiche emerged from the operating room with the controlled exhaustion of someone who had just performed delicate work on unfamiliar anatomy. Jake's shoulder joint had been more severely damaged than even her advanced scanners had initially detected. Torn ligaments, fractured bone, and nerve damage that threatened permanent loss of function in his right arm. The human healing process is remarkably resilient, she explained to Commander Valhes, who had remained in the medical bay throughout the procedure. But Cadet Morrison pushed well beyond what should have been physically possible. His species appears to possess pain tolerance and determination factors that exceed our current understanding. The commander studied Jake's unconscious form through the clear wall of the recovery chamber. Will he keep full use of the limb? With proper rehabilitation, yes, but the recovery process will take several months, and he will likely experience some permanent limitation in his range of motion. Dr. Quiche made notes on her medical tablet. I must confess, Commander, I have never encountered a patient who continued to function at such a high level while carrying injuries of this severity. It challenges several assumptions about pain response and physical limitations. What neither the doctor nor the commander knew was that Jake was already awake, though still groggy from the anesthesia. He could hear their conversation through the recovery chamber's monitoring system, and their words confirmed what he had already begun to suspect. His military career might be over before it had truly begun. Physical limitations were career-ending in the Galactic Defense Force. Officers were expected to meet strict fitness standards throughout their service, and permanent injuries often resulted in medical discharge. 3 years of academy training, countless hours of study, and the hopes of his family back on Earth, all potentially wasted because he had been too stubborn to quit when wisdom said to withdraw. But even as that thought crossed his mind, Jake found himself rejecting it. He had saved his team in Phase 2 and evacuated every civilian in Phase 3. Those achievements weren't diminished by his injury. If anything, they were made more meaningful by the cost he had paid to achieve them. Recovery from the surgery took longer than expected. Jake's body responded well to the advanced medical treatments available at the academy, but Dr. Quiche insisted on complete bed rest for the first 72 hours. It was during this forced inactivity that Jake began to understand the full impact of his performance during the trial. Visitors came in a steady stream. Zix was first, bringing news from their shared quarters and updates on the other cadets' recovery from their own trials. The Veltar's compound eyes reflected something Jake had never seen before, a mixture of respect and something approaching. "Oh, the instructors speak of little else," Zix reported, settling his insect-like form into the chair beside Jake's bed. "Your performance has become required study material for tactical analysis courses. They are calling it the Morrison Defense." Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. It wasn't anything special, just did what needed to be done. "That is precisely why it was special," Zix replied. "Any competent commander could have managed an orderly withdrawal. Only you chose to hold an impossible position and somehow succeeded. Other members of Jake's Phase 2 team visited as well. Cora brought flowers from the Academy's botanical gardens, a Nexan tradition for honoring warriors. Vish and Tem presented him with a small crystal sculpture that Orions gave to those who had saved their lives. Even Gex, the massive Krathen, "Warrior, came to pay his respects. Your species puzzles mine," Gex rumbled in his deep voice. "Krathen understands strength and honor in combat. But humans possess something we do not, the ability to exceed physical limitations through will alone. It is a formidable gift." "Sometimes it feels more like a curse," Jake admitted, rotating, his shoulder experimentally and wincing at the persistent ache. "All gifts carry burdens," Gex replied. "The question is whether the burden makes the gift more precious or more dangerous." The most surprising visitor was Commander Valhes himself. The Krathen officer arrived on Jake's 4th day of recovery, carrying a data tablet and wearing an expression that Jake couldn't quite read. "How are you feeling, Cadet Morrison?" "Ready to get back to duty, sir," Jake replied automatically, then caught himself. "I mean, ready to return when Dr. Quiche clears me for activity." The commander's scaled features shifted, and what Jake had learned was the Krathen equivalent of a smile. "Your dedication is noted. I have come to discuss your performance during the trial and its implications for your future service." Jake felt his stomach drop. This was it. The conversation where he would be told that his injuries disqualified him from active duty, that he would be offered some desk job or medical discharge. "Sir, I understand that my injury may affect my fitness ratings, but—" Commander Valhes raised a clawed hand for silence. "Cadet Morrison, you misunderstand the purpose of this discussion. Your performance during the trial has been reviewed by the Academy Board, the Tactical Assessment Committee, and senior officers from multiple fleet commands. The consensus is unanimous." Jake waited, not trusting himself to speak. "You have demonstrated leadership qualities and tactical innovation that exceed the standards expected of a graduating cadet. Your ability to function under extreme physical duress while concerning from a medical standpoint represents the kind of determination that wins battles when conventional tactics fail." The commander paused, studying Jake's expression. Upon your medical clearance and graduation from the academy, you will be assigned to the starship USS Defiant as a junior tactical officer. Captain Rodriguez specifically requested your assignment after reviewing your trial performance. Jake blinked, certain he had misheard. Sir, I'm being assigned to active duty, despite the injury? Because of your performance despite the injury, Commander Val Hess corrected. The Galactic Defense Force has learned much about human capabilities through your example. We intend to learn more. After the commander left, Jake lay in his recovery bed staring at the ceiling and trying to process what had just happened. Not only was his career not over, it was beginning with an assignment to one of the fleet's premier vessels. Dr. Quiche appeared for her evening rounds, scanner in hand, and her usual expression of professional concern. Your healing rate continues to exceed projections, she reported after completing her examination. Though I still recommend against any strenuous activity for at least another week. Dr. Quiche, Jake said quietly. Can I ask you something? Of course. During the trial when I was injured, how did I keep functioning? I mean, from a medical standpoint, what allowed me to continue when the pain should have been overwhelming? The Orion healer was quiet for a long moment. Her tentacles, moving in patterns Jake had learned, indicated deep thought. I have been studying that question extensively since your surgery. The human nervous system contains redundancies and adaptation mechanisms that my species had not previously documented. When subjected to extreme stress, your brain appears capable of rerouting pain signals and flooding damaged tissue with natural compounds that maintain function despite injury. She paused, manipulating her scanner to display a complex chart of brain activity. But the physical adaptations are only part of the explanation. Your species possesses something that cannot be measured by medical instruments. A psychological framework that refuses to accept failure as inevitable. This mental resilience appears to trigger the physical adaptations that allow you to exceed normal limitations. Jake studied the readouts, seeing his own nervous system mapped in ways that made it look almost alien. Is that why the other species seem so interested in human performance? Indeed. The galaxy has known humans for less than a century, but in that time, your species has developed a reputation for achieving impossible victories through sheer determination. Your trial performance has provided quantifiable data supporting these observations. Dr. Quiche made additional notes on her tablet. There is something else you should know, Cadet Morrison. Your performance has been transmitted to the Galactic Council as part of a study on human psychology and capabilities. Representatives from 17 different species have requested copies of your trial recordings. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. They're studying me? They are studying what you represent, Dr. Quiche corrected gently. Your species has become something of a phenomenon in military circles. The ability to continue fighting when defeat seems certain, to push beyond physical limitations through mental discipline to achieve victory through sheer refusal to accept failure. These traits are being studied by every major military force in the galaxy. That night, as Jake lay awake despite the late hour, he thought about the implications of what Dr. Quiche had told him. Humans weren't necessarily stronger or faster or smarter than other species, but they possessed something equally valuable, the ability to keep fighting when logic said fighting was pointless. It was a sobering thought, and Jake wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea that his species was being studied like a curiosity. But if human determination could save lives and win battles, then perhaps being a curiosity was a price worth paying. Outside his window, the lights of Kepler Station twinkled against the starfield beyond. Graduation day at the Galactic Defense Academy dawned clear and bright. Kepler Station's artificial atmosphere processors created a perfect simulation of an Earth spring morning. Jake Morrison stood with his fellow cadets in the Academy's main auditorium, wearing his dress uniform and trying not to favor his still healing shoulder. The ceremony itself was a blend of traditions from dozens of worlds. Feltar cadets performed their ritual clicking sequences. Orion sang harmonies that brought tears to the eyes of every species present. Krathan warriors demonstrated combat forms that had been passed down for thousands of years. When it came time for the human cadets to represent their traditions, Jake and his two classmates simply stood at attention. This display of disciplined readiness somehow seemed to capture the essence of their species. Admiral Kethvar, the Academy's Nexan commandant, delivered the graduation address from a podium that adjusted automatically to accommodate her small stature. Her words carried the weight of someone who had seen combat across multiple sectors and understood the true cost of the uniform they were all about to earn. "You leave here today as officers in the Galactic Defense Force," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's acoustics. "But you are more than officers. You are representatives of your species, ambassadors of your worlds, and guardians of the principles that bind our alliance together." Jake felt a surge of pride as he looked around at his fellow graduates. 47. Cadets from 17 different worlds, all united by their commitment to protect the innocent and preserve peace across the galaxy. The diversity was staggering, yet somehow they had all found common ground in their shared dedication to service. "Some of you have distinguished yourselves through exceptional performance during your trials," Admiral Kethvar continued, her gaze settling momentarily on Jake. "These individuals have shown us that courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of fear. That determination is not the inability to feel pain, but the willingness to continue despite it." The individual awards began with academic achievements, progressing through various categories of excellence. When they reached combat performance, Jake was surprised to hear his name called first. "Cadet Jake Morrison," Admiral Kethvar announced, "for demonstrating exceptional leadership, tactical innovation, and personal courage under extreme duress. Your performance during the final trials has redefined our understanding of human capabilities and set a new standard for determination in the face of overwhelming odds." As Jake walked forward to receive his award, the applause was unlike anything he had ever heard. It wasn't just polite recognition. It was genuine respect from beings who had witnessed something extraordinary. Even the instructors, normally reserved, in their approval were applauding with enthusiasm. Commander Val Hess stepped forward to present the award. The massive Krathan officer's expression was unreadable as always, but there was something in his eyes that suggested deep respect. "Cadet Morrison," he said in his deep voice, "in my 30 years of military service I have seen many acts of courage, but I have never seen anyone continue to function and lead others while carrying injuries that should have rendered them unconscious. Your performance has been studied by military leaders across 17 systems. You have not just graduated from this academy, you have become a legend." Jake accepted the award, a crystal sculpture depicting the Academy's symbol surrounded by stars representing the member worlds of the Galactic Alliance. It was beautiful, but more importantly, it represented recognition from beings who understood the true meaning of courage. As he returned to his place among the graduates, Jake caught sight of Zix in the crowd. His Veltar roommate's compound eyes were focused intently on him, and Jake could see genuine pride in his alien friend's expression. Next to Zix sat the other members of his Phase 2 team. Cora, Vish, Tem, and even the massive Gex. They had all come to see him graduate. The ceremony continued with assignments to various ships and stations throughout the galaxy. Jake listened as his classmates received their orders, each assignment representing the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Some would serve on exploration vessels, pushing the boundaries of known space. Others would join diplomatic missions, working to maintain peace between species. Still others would take positions on the frontier, protecting colonies from pirates and hostile forces. When his name was called, Jake stepped forward once again. "Cadet Morrison," Admiral Kethvar announced, "you are hereby assigned to the starship, USS Defiant under the command of Captain Maria Rodriguez. You will serve as Junior Tactical Officer with the rank of Ensign. Your first duty assignment will be a patrol mission to the Outer Rim, where recent pirate activity has threatened civilian shipping lanes." Jake felt his heart race with excitement. The USS Defiant was one of the newest ships in the fleet, equipped with the latest technology and crewed by some of the most experienced officers in the service. To be assigned there as a new graduate was an incredible honor. As the ceremony concluded and the new officers began to mingle with their families and friends, Jake found himself surrounded by well-wishers. But the most meaningful moment came when Dr. Quiche approached him with her characteristic tentacled grace. "Ensign Morrison," she said, using his new rank for the first time, I wanted to speak with you before you depart for your assignment. Of course, Doctor. What can I do for you? I have been corresponding with medical officers throughout the fleet regarding your case, she explained, her tentacles moving in patterns that Jake had learned indicated excitement. Your recovery has been remarkable, but more importantly, your performance while injured has led to new protocols for emergency medical treatment. We are developing techniques based on human physiology that may help other species push beyond their normal limitations when lives are at stake. Jake wasn't sure how to respond to that. The idea that his stubbornness during the trial might help save lives in the future was both humbling and overwhelming. There is something else, Dr. Quiche continued. The Galactic Medical Council has requested that you participate in a study of human pain tolerance and stress response. It would involve periodic medical examinations during your service, nothing that would interfere with your duties. The data could be invaluable for understanding how to better support all species during combat operations. I'd be honored to participate, Jake replied without hesitation. As the reception wound down, Jake found himself standing alone on one of the Academy's observation decks, looking out at the stars. His shoulder still ached, a constant reminder of the price he had paid during his trials. But it also served as a reminder of what he had accomplished. Deep thoughts, Ensign Morrison. Jake turned to find Commander Val Hess approaching, his scaled form moving with the quiet confidence of a career military officer. Just thinking about what comes next, sir. The Defiant is a good ship with a good crew, the commander said, joining Jake at the observation window. Captain Rodriguez specifically requested you after reviewing your trial performance. She believes that human determination will be valuable in the missions ahead. I won't let her down, sir. I know you won't, Commander Val Hess replied. But I want you to remember something, Morrison. What you did during your trials was extraordinary, but it was also dangerous. Don't let your determination become recklessness. The galaxy needs officers who can think as well as they can fight. Jake nodded, understanding the wisdom in the commander's words. Understood, sir. Good. Now, your transport to the Defiant leaves in 6 hours. Use that time to say your goodbyes and prepare yourself for what lies ahead. The Outer Rim can be a dangerous place, but I have confidence that you and your new crewmates will handle whatever challenges you encounter. As Commander Val Hess walked away, Jake turned back to the stars. Somewhere out there was his new home, his new crew, and his new life as an officer in the Galactic Defense Force. The trials were over, but his real test was just beginning. He thought about his family back on Earth, who would soon receive word of his graduation and assignment. He thought about his classmates, who would spread across the galaxy to serve on dozens of different ships and stations. Most of all, he thought about the civilians he would be sworn to protect, beings from countless worlds who depended on officers like him to keep them safe. Jake Morrison had taken a blow that would have hospitalized most beings in the galaxy, but he had kept moving forward, and in doing so, had earned his place among the stars. The human spirit, with all its stubborn determination and refusal to accept defeat, was about to be tested on a galactic stage. He was ready for whatever came. Next,